All right, welcome back to the #1 breakfast show in the country, morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busiku, and of course, right now I'm joined by Mike. Yes, in Sedeko, he's the director. Planning and information at the National Environmental Management Authority. We're going to be talking about the ever-changing climate. Yes, the National State of Environment Report 2018-2019, which was last. Yes, it was finished in December of 2020 under the theme, yes, managing the environment for resilient forces. What is it? Managing the environment for climate resilient livelihoods and sustainable economic development. It's kind of a very, very long theme. But that is the theme of the National State of Environment Report in 2018-19. So we want to know what are the contents and how far can that information go in helping us arrest the dwindling number of wetlands and forests in this country. We have Mike Nsedeko. He is the Director, Policy Planning and Information. Very good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Tell us, what is the National State of Environment Report 2018-2019?
Well, I'm very honored to be in the studios of NTV to talk to the country about a very, very important tool that we use in environmental management, and that is the National State of Environment Report. This report derives from the National Environment Management Policy of 1994 and the National Environment Act number 5 of 2019, which mandates NEMA to produce the National State of Environment Report after 2 years. Now, this report is an authoritative account of the status of the environment in the country. It gives the importance of the environment in detail. It gives the trends and the projection in the area of environment. It brings out the current issues pertaining to environment, and then also brings out the challenges and opportunities that they're in the environment field. So it is a very important tool in environmental management because you can't manage what you don't know. So this report tells you what is happening in the environment, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and therefore it forms the basis of you designing interventions to address the problems in the environment. Now, this report is quoted nationally and internationally, and it is authoritative. So the basis upon which decisions are made, researches are made, and so on, is actually based on the findings of that report. So it is a very, very important tool for us environmental managers, because it is upon what is in that report, the findings of the report and the recommendation, that you design interventions to address problems in the environment.
And of course, being the Director, Policy Planning and Information, you are the right person to talk to at this opportune moment about the National State of Environment Report 2018-2019. But then we also do know that this report is authored every 2 years. Correct. Is that wise for planning?
Yes, it is. You see, the reason we do it after 2 years, of course, one is that that is what the law provides. But the reasoning of the law was that if you did this analysis within 1 year, then you wouldn't have enough time to to measure the changes in the environment. So I think the framers of the law thought that 2 years would be enough for you to measure any changes that might have occurred in the environment. You see, one of the tenets of this report is basically measurement of where you were, for example, in 2016 and where you are in 2018 in terms of environmental performance. So you therefore tell whether you are doing badly or you are doing good. And if you are doing badly, what do you need to correct to make good? If you are doing good, how do you better the situation? So I think 2 years are enough for us to be able to measure the changes and therefore focus our energies.
What if the changes are too drastic, Mr. Mike Nsedeko, within those 2 years, and then we need some instantaneous resolutions to help arrest the situation? Wouldn't those 2 years go a long way in actually undoing the good work?
Well, you see, once we produce this
Farmers
report,
are battered, floods have washed away all the crops.
Yes.
If there is a drought, everything is now burnt to smithereens. There is nothing. And then we wait for 2 years for you to come out with a recommendation so that we can plan for the country.
No. You see, when we make this report, we don't go to sleep. We continue to monitor.
All right.
But the production of the report, it is a protracted process. You take, and that's why it takes that long. You have to go to the field and find out what exactly is on the ground on a number of issues that you are trying to measure. If it is air quality, you've got to go to the field and actually take the measurements. If it is water quality, same thing. If it is forest degradation, you have to measure. Now, these processes take time.
Indeed.
However, between the time you produce the report, for example, we are launching it tomorrow, between that time and the next 2 years, we'll still be on ground measuring and trying to implement intervention. So it isn't like that when you produce the report, then you go to
go back in deep slumber
and forget about
it. I was telling some of my acquaintances about the show I was going to be having today, National State of Environment Report 2018-2019, and they were telling me, wait, until in 2021, you're discussing a document that was last authored in 2019. I told them, no, it was last authored in 2020. So we are now taking a look at what was looked at within those 2 years so that we can come up with recommendations and so forth. And I was also looking at the theme, managing the environment for climate resilient livelihoods and sustainable economic development. Yes. What was the thinking about the theme? The thinking about it, behind it?
The thinking behind is basically a recognition that Uganda, particularly, and most of Africa really, relies mostly on what we call ENR, and that is environment and natural resources. If you're talking about agriculture, you are relying on land. If you're talking about fisheries, you are relying on the lake, forestry, and so on. So if you are therefore, if your livelihood and development is based on ENR, then you must take very good care of that environment. All right. So I mean, you can't pour from an empty cup.
You can't.
You get it.
Indeed.
So if you are going to benefit from that environment and you recognize that much of your livelihood support and economic development is derived from the environment, then you must take good care of it. So we are saying, if therefore that is the case, the basis should be focused on us managing the environment. Once we have good management of the environment, then this environment will give us resilience in terms of supporting our livelihoods and supporting our economic development. So basically, the theme recognizes the nexus, between ENR and our livelihoods. That our existence depends on ENR, but for it to give us that resilience, we must manage it well.
For us to be climate resilient, we need to better manage our environment.
Absolutely.
For sustainable economic development.
Absolutely.
But then if we've been mismanaging our environment since time immemorial and we're not climate resilient as it is, because if yesterday it was flooding and today it is too hot and then vice versa, meaning the climate has already expedited that process of, climate change. The situation is getting out of hand. I'm looking at that smallholder farmer in the village, the subsistence farmer who is simply focusing on that little food for, eating and so forth. But then the floods are hitting, everything is washed away. When it's too hot, all the food is scorched and dried up to smithereens. How best can we help these smallholder farmers vis-a-vis subsistence farmers to be climate resilient? What ought to be done?
Okay, so the issue of climate change and environmental disasters and so on are not specific to Uganda. Indeed. They are world over, right? And so we cannot say we are unique to the situation. Now, what we need to do is to begin from the principle that environment management is a shared responsibility. The little action you do at that individual level, if you do that, I do it, and the other one does it, will build and we make our environment better. So that smallholder farmer must adhere to the advice that we keep giving, okay? In terms of agriculture, for example, you must use good agricultural practices, all right? You must ensure that you have trees that give, and grass that give cover to the soil so that you prevent issues of soil erosion.
Water evaporation.
Exactly. And then, of course, the issue of, for example, the use of plastic bags, carrier bags, because we've seen their effect on soils due to this you know, practice of littering everywhere.
Yes.
And this has got a great effect on soil productivity and so on and so forth. So I think the message we would be sending out as NEMA would be that listen to the message and let the practice of environmental management begin with you, because it is a shared responsibility. You do your job, you do your bit, the other one does the bit, and a collection of those individual actions can make a difference.
I'm looking at a situation where you tell a farmer, please plant drought-resistant crops, plant some cotton, plant some maize, because it is too hot. And then tomorrow it starts raining. I mean, that's the messaging coming from you, telling this subsistence farmer, you know what, we anticipate a dry spell. Maybe you should embark on growing perennial crops. Yes. But then it starts raining. Okay. Floods, big floods. And then this farmer is left flabbergasted, wondering, what do I do now? So we are talking about how we can help our farmers to adapt to the ever-changing climate. Is there a plan in your policy planning to help farmers adapt to the ever-changing climate?
Yeah, of course. If you notice of late in the last few years, the Uganda National Meteorological Authority has really improved the way they do things.
All right.
And we have taken note that now the weather projections are actually up to, up to fact. They are actually factual. So I think the point should be that we deepen dissemination of this information so that it can be able to
updating the same information, because this whole year we've been telling farmers plant perennial crops. It's going to be too hot. But guess what is happening? It's been raining cats and dogs as we were coming to work today.
Of course, you see...
Just like yesterday and the day before.
That's correct. But you see, environment prediction has those, issues. You may predict this, but then, doesn't come out well. But overall, we are saying that the status of weather information has improved. And so we would rely on our people down there to listen to what these authorities are telling them. And also, of course, practice the best methods of farming that there is.
Like?
Yes. Like, of course, like I said, you need to ensure that you don't plant on hilly places, because that means that when it rains, your crops and everything will be washed away.
At least practice contour plowing.
Exactly. You need to plant trees so that you are able to, get the shade and also, prevent that very fast runoff, from the hills downhill. And then, of course, plant appropriate crops for your area, because different areas...
Based on the weather.
Okay, and then, of course, listen to the information from the experts. All
right, the biggest idea I've gotten from that is listen to the experts when they tell you the information on the ground. Correct. All right, as a farmer. Now, let's talk about some of the contents of the National State of the Environment Report 2018-2019. For 2 years, you've been handling these investigations, trying to ascertain what is happening to our environment. To this date, what have you figured out?
Well, the National State of Environment Report is a very, very detailed report.
Acquaint me.
And it covers the environment generally, every aspect of the environment. We have the green environment, we have the brown environment, we have the blue environment. So this report digs deep into all of those areas. But for the last 3 reports, we adopted an approach of, focusing on a few aspects so that we undertake in-depth analysis of these aspects. So for this report, we talked about
the previous 3, you were focusing on few aspects, like?
Of course, for the previous report, we focused more on forestry, wetlands, and then fisheries resources, we focused on minerals. Okay. Now,
what is different in this one?
In this one, we talk about the environment generally, like I said, but we pick a few areas that we give special attention.
The 7 factors you are telling me about.
So the 7 factors for this report, the particular one we are going to launch tomorrow.
Right.
1, we talk about biodiversity. And in biodiversity, we again focus on forestry, we focus on wetlands, and we focus on wildlife.
Amazing.
Now, in wildlife, of course, you may know that we have a very serious issue of poaching, and then the issue of wildlife-human conflict. So this report has explored and brought out possible interventions that can be used.
Let's break them down.
Well, the first one, of course, is heightened enforcement to be able to address the issue of poaching. And then, of course, on the issue of wildlife-human conflict, the issue of demarcation of wildlife parks is very critical. And I think the president has been emphatic that, for example, for Action Falls, you've got to put an electric fence so that you prevent animals coming out of the park and attacking people's
You did
gardens.
see what happened at Queen Elizabeth National Park.
Yes.
6 lions getting poisoned.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
The fortunate thing is that the culprits have been apprehended, and so we think that can put a stop.
You think it's really possible to harmonize these two groups? You have the wildlife and the individuals living near these habitats. Can they harmoniously live together?
Exactly. I think one of the things we are actually putting forward is that these nearby communities should be able to partake of the incomes that come to the parks.
Taking us back to the theme, managing the environment for climate resilient.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I see.
So that these communities become part of the process and appreciate why we need to keep our wildlife. Then the second issue we looked at was the issue of oil and gas and minerals. And here we basically are focusing on because the final investment decision is about to be made, and what that would mean is that we are now going into full-scale production. And if you are going into full-scale production, there are so many issues of environment that you are going to tackle.
Really smart. That's really smart, yes.
Exactly. You recognize that we have approved
carbon emissions and so forth. Yes.
For all of those projects, the Telenga project, and then the ECOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, and the refinery, and so on.
So you want to ensure, as they embark on this new process to drill this new oil, the environment is protected?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. And NEMA has done a very, very good job. And that's why you see that from the time of exploration up to date, there has not been any environmental disaster in the Albertine Graben. That is all because of our effort. Now, the other issue we touched on was the issue of refugees and environment. You will note that Uganda has over 1.3 million refugees.
Indeed.
And these refugees actually exert a lot of pressure on the environment in terms of their livelihood, because, they depend a lot on biomass in terms of firewood, in terms of charcoal, in terms of water, and so on. So in places where you have settlements, you really have pressure on the environment. There has been depletion of vegetation and biomass. And therefore, we looked at that aspect for us to try to understand what the problem is and try to design interventions.
It seems like the problem has been there, Mr. Mike.
Yes, the problem has been there.
And many people have been talking about it, and we are wondering, where is government on this? They've been plowing trees left, right, and center, trying to make a living. But the residents knew that, these are refugees and they're going through a very, very hard situation. But us as conservationists, we knew in the long run, this will have debilitating effects on our environment. Deforestation, it has been rife. So you identified the problem. What are you doing about it?
Well, I will tell you that about a year ago, we went to all refugee camps. And the idea was to try to understand the issues firsthand. And we actually documented all issues and wrote a proposal which has been submitted to government for funding. But we think that this proposal will actually address the issue of refugees and environment for good. We are proposing issues of tree planting, especially focusing on fruit trees. We have proposed issues to do with alternative energy sources. We are proposing, eco stoves and so on that are cheaper, but use less fuel, really, to address the issues. And we have also recommended to government. And you are planning
to give them to these refugees free of charge?
Well, we are thinking that government can come in and probably co-finance the project, so that a person can make a down payment, a nominal down payment, and then government subsidizes.
Because remember, it takes us to the initial conversation we had before starting this conversation, when we were talking about giving people messaging or information they might not be able to implement.
Exactly.
If we tell them to get gas and they can't get gas, and the cheapest source of energy is firewood, they will go for that firewood.
Absolutely.
Unless government is willing to provide.
Absolutely. That's why we are saying this is going to be like co-sharing.
Indeed.
So we get some nominal. You know, when you give out free things, then the person you are giving may
Even
not
those
treasure.
Even those that are not beneficiaries will come.
Exactly. So you give somebody who gives you a nominal fee,
Indeed.
but then government subsidizes.
All right.
And then we have also recommended a strategic environment assessment for all refugee camps, so that we try to quantify what problems they will occasion to the environment and try to mitigate even before they come, because we know that probably the refugee problem may not go away
When
tomorrow.
you did talk to these refugees during your assessment, did they tell you that poverty is the biggest driver of most of these activities on the natural resources?
Exactly. They don't have options, really. They don't have options. I mean, government and you know, the UNHCR gives them posho and beans, and they have to find ways of making this posho and beans. And the nearest option is actually the biomass. So that's why we are saying that for us to ease the pressure on the biomass, then probably we need to improvise and give them alternative sources.
Because I'm looking at a situation where you give them gas and then there's that relief on our forests. But then where will they get the food? So they'll run for wildlife meat. So
No. Government, the UNHCR has continued to support refugees, especially with basics, basically.
But of course, the cuts are affecting them. The cuts in the rations of food.
That's true.
Indeed. So that is the third factor.
Yes.
The fourth one.
The fourth factor was on air quality. Now, air quality becomes a bit of a problem because some hospitals are reporting a surge in respiratory diseases.
Yes, it's true.
And this basically is linked to the air quality, the air that we breathe in, especially in urban centers.
Now that most of the sectors are reopening.
Exactly. So we did an analysis of air quality in Uganda, and we have found out that contrary to popular belief that actually it is the factories that pollute more, it is actually vehicular emission that is more prevalent. So you have all the cars on the roads, and you also have
Mike,
borders.
We've known this problem since 1999, and the recommendation was, please phase out all these old cars. But still, we are still here in the same place.
Well, you've got to understand the economy that we live in. Our economy is still it still has some challenges. So as you implement certain policies,
so we still have to grapple with challenges like being a second-hand dumping site for most of these
government has
countries.
Actually done some work. We did a study, I think, about 7 years ago.
Yes.
About vehicular emission, and that study informed government policy of reducing the years that of the cars that come into the country. Right. We have not reached there yet, but I think government is on a positive trend.
All right, can we fast forward finish all the factors that were
okay?
In this
the other
report?
factor had to do with water quality. You know, there is issues of water quality in this country,
like
as well as quantities of water. So we did an analysis together, of course, with the Directorate of Water Resources Management, and we noted that some, you know, water sources may have a few contaminations. Right. But overall, I think we have a good situation regarding water quality.
Lastly,
then we did the issue of soil quality in terms of how fit, which soil is fit
pH,
for
acidity.
what.
Yes.
Exactly. And we note that there is a decline in soil productivity in most places, and that's why you
is
need
it too acidic, less acidic?
Well, I think
is it viable for crop planting? Is it not viable for crop planting?
It varies from place to place. All right. But overall, there is a slight decline in soil productivity, and so you need to enhance it with application of fertilizer.
So acquaint us with the resolutions moving forward. What ought to be done to avert this very disastrous bad trend?
Of soil?
No.
Yes.
The National State of Environment report. You've told us the factors, and they are really debilitating developments. So what are some of the resolutions that also came into the report?
Okay, so there are quite a number because this is a voluminous report and which touches very many things.
For 2 years.
Yes. So we are recommending a number of things, among which is the issue of enforcement. And so here we are recommending strongly that government considers setting up the Environmental Protection Force as envisaged in the National Environment Act. The idea behind this is that Whereas we have talked and sensitized and educated, some people still remain adamant. And therefore you need a little bit of stick to ensure that there is compliance. So we have recommended that as a matter of urgency, government sets up the Environmental Protection Force. In terms of oil and gas, we have recommended a number of things, but one of the pertinent issues is that government operationalizes what we call the National Oil Spills Contingency Plan. This plan sets out a framework of how you manage a disaster should it occur in the oil and gas sector. So this framework requires a lot of investment in terms of the requisite equipment and training of personnel and so on and so forth. So that is one of our strong recommendations that is coming through. Then on the issue of mineral resources, particularly on the gold mining, you know, gold mining has a challenge because the miners use mercury, and this mercury is very detrimental to the health of the persons and the environment. So we are actually recommending phasing out mercury so that we curtail that challenge.
That's amazing.
Yes,
because you've been calling for that since time immemorial.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
And then on the issue of vehicle emission, we recommend to government that we get a way of reducing the traffic in cities, particularly for border borders. You know, border borders actually pollute more than
all these second-hand cars have to go.
Exactly. So we are recommending to government to design interventions that will reduce the flow of border borders in the city, and also thinking forward, ensure that these vehicles are actually inspected annually, you know, so that we get to know those that are not roadworthy and so that they can get off our roads. So the report has a number of recommendations.
And of course it has a number of recommendations, but you've had 3 previous National State of Environment reports that you had authored. Any of those recommendations in there, have they ever been implemented?
Let me first correct what I said. I said that for the last 3 reports, we took a thematic approach. But overall, since the formation of NEMA, we have done 13 National State of Environment reports. Actually, we are an example to the region.
And all those reports have come with recommendations. So what the viewer wants to know is, have you ever implemented any of those recommendations?
Very many. One of the recommendations, for example, was the formation of the District Environment Office at every district. It came from that report. The idea was environmental management is a decentralized function, and so you need somebody at the local government to be able to take care of the environment. That one came from that report. The issue of having an environmental desk in all ministries and agencies also came from that report. The issue of integration of environmental concerns in all budget framework papers came from that report. The issue of demarcation and the gazettement of wetlands came from that report.
And of course, the launch of this report, the National State of Environment Report for 2018-2019, is tomorrow. Let us in on what we should expect.
Well, tomorrow we are launching this report. We are very privileged and we are very excited. We shall be launching it from the NEMA house, from our office. The function will start at 10 o'clock. And we'll have, among other things, a panel of experts to discuss this report in depth. And this launch is going to be live on NTV.
Amazing.
So I will interest everybody to tune in tomorrow at 10 o'clock to be able to listen in on the launch. And
we shall be here to relay those messages. Of course, I was so happy when you talked about an environmental force as one of the recommendations. We've been calling for this since time immemorial. Could we have a force that actually is there as a big brother to protect the environment? Mike Nsereko, the Director, Policy Planning and Information at NEMA, thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, you're still watching Morning at NTV. Dr. Mohan Keshavamarthi is here. He's a senior urologist. Yes, we would like to know, why is there too much, prostate cancer in Uganda? Why are so many grappling with this problem? Dr. Mohan Keshavamarthi has a lot of information for you. Do not move a muscle. We'll be right back.